When someone suddenly disappears from a relationship without explanation, it often leaves the other person confused, hurt, and searching for answers. This behavior, commonly referred to as ghosting, is not merely a modern dating phenomenon, but rather a reflection of deep-seated psychological mechanisms. At its core, the act of disappearing without a word can be understood as a manifestation of the fear of love and intimacy. But why would someone fear something as inherently fulfilling as love? To answer this, we must look beyond the surface and explore the unconscious forces driving this behavior. Love, at its most profound level, requires vulnerability. To truly connect with another person, one must expose their emotions, insecurities, and deepest fears. However, for those who disappear without explanation, this level of exposure can feel overwhelmingly dangerous. Instead of facing these fears, they choose to withdraw, often without consciously understanding why. Their silence is not necessarily an act of cruelty, but rather an unconscious defense mechanism, a way to protect themselves from perceived emotional risk. Psychologists have long studied attachment styles to explain how people relate to love and intimacy. Those with an avoidant attachment style, for example, may find closeness uncomfortable and interpret deep emotional connections as threats to their independence. In extreme cases, the mere possibility of emotional dependence can trigger a fight-or-flight response, leading them to abruptly cut off all communication. However, attachment theory alone does not fully explain why some individuals struggle so profoundly with love. This is where Carl Jung's insights into the unconscious mind become particularly valuable. Jung proposed that much of human behavior is influenced by unconscious patterns, shaped by past experiences, personal traumas, and collective archetypes. The fear of love can be deeply rooted in unresolved psychological wounds, often originating in childhood. If an individual has experienced abandonment, emotional neglect, or inconsistent affection in their formative years, they may internalize the belief that love is unreliable or even dangerous. As a result, when faced with genuine affection in adulthood, their unconscious mind may react with fear, leading them to retreat rather than engage. Moreover, Jung's concept of the shadow, the hidden and often rejected aspects of the self, plays a crucial role in this dynamic. A person who disappears from a relationship without explanation is often fleeing not from the other person, but from parts of themselves they are unwilling to confront. They may fear their own dependency, their own capacity for deep emotions, or even their own potential for being hurt. Instead of acknowledging these fears, they project them onto the relationship and escape before they feel too exposed. For the person left behind, this sudden disappearance can be devastating. It can create self-doubt, anxiety, and an obsessive search for closure. However, understanding that this behavior is often rooted in unconscious fear rather than a deliberate act of rejection can provide some clarity. Recognizing that the disappearance is more about the other person's inner struggles than about one's own worth is an essential step toward healing. Ultimately, love demands courage. Those who disappear out of fear may be avoiding the very thing that could lead them to the deepest form of personal growth. The challenge, then, is not only in understanding this fear, but in learning how to face it rather than run from it. To truly understand why some people fear love to the point of disappearing, we must go deeper into the workings of the unconscious mind. Carl Jung, one of the most influential figures in psychology, proposed that much of human behavior is shaped by hidden forces beyond our conscious awareness. Unlike Sigmund Freud, who focused primarily on repressed desires, Jung believed that the unconscious contained not only personal experiences, but also universal patterns, archetypes, that influence the way we perceive and engage with the world. In the context of relationships, these unconscious forces can trigger deep-seated fears, causing individuals to retreat from love rather than embrace it. Jung divided the unconscious into two parts: the personal unconscious and the collective unconscious. The personal unconscious consists of forgotten or repressed experiences, while the collective unconscious is made up of inherited psychological structures shared by all human beings. These structures, known as archetypes, shape our perceptions, emotions, and behaviors, often without us realizing it. When someone suddenly withdraws from a relationship, their reaction is not always a conscious decision. It may be an instinctive response driven by an unconscious fear that has been shaped by past wounds and archetypal influences. One of the most relevant Jungian concepts in understanding the fear of love is the shadow. The shadow represents the hidden and often denied aspects of the self, qualities, emotions, or desires that we suppress because they do not align with our self-image. Many people who fear intimacy have unresolved aspects of their shadow that make them uncomfortable with vulnerability. If they associate love with pain, rejection, or loss, they may unconsciously sabotage their relationships to avoid reliving past wounds. Instead of confronting their fears, they disappear, believing that distance will keep them safe. Another key Jungian concept that influences romantic behavior is the anima and animus. According to Jung, the anima represents the unconscious feminine aspect in men, while the animus represents the unconscious masculine aspect in women. These archetypes shape how we perceive and relate to romantic partners. If a person has a negative or distorted relationship with their anima or animus, often due to unresolved childhood experiences, they may struggle to form healthy emotional connections. For example, a man with a wounded anima may fear emotional closeness because he unconsciously associates feminine energy with control, abandonment, or emotional pain. Likewise, a woman with a wounded animus may distrust masculine energy, leading her to fear commitment or view relationships as a source of potential harm. The unconscious mind also holds complexes, which are clusters of emotions, memories, and beliefs tied to past experiences. A person who has experienced rejection, betrayal, or emotional neglect may develop a love complex that associates intimacy with fear or pain. When they find themselves in a relationship where deep emotions are involved, this complex may be triggered, causing overwhelming anxiety. Rather than confronting their emotions, they may instinctively withdraw to avoid reliving past trauma. Understanding Jung's theories allows us to see that the fear of love is rarely a simple matter of personal preference or choice. Instead, it is often rooted in unconscious fears, unresolved traumas, and inherited psychological patterns. The challenge for those who disappear from relationships is not just about overcoming fear, but about bringing these hidden forces into consciousness. Only then can true emotional healing and transformation occur. Carl Jung's concept of the shadow plays a fundamental role in understanding why some people fear love so intensely that they choose to disappear rather than confront their emotions. The shadow represents the unconscious hidden aspects of the self, qualities, desires, and fears that a person represses because they do not fit their self-image. When someone withdraws from a relationship without explanation, they are often not running from their partner, but from parts of themselves they are unwilling to face. Love, by its very nature, has a way of bringing the shadow to the surface, forcing individuals to confront aspects of themselves they would rather keep buried. For many, relationships act as mirrors, reflecting both the best and the most unacknowledged parts of the self. In romantic intimacy, people are often confronted with emotions they cannot easily control: vulnerability, dependency, and deep-seated fears of rejection. If someone has spent their life avoiding these emotions, the sudden intensity of love can trigger an instinctive desire to escape. The fear is not just about being hurt by another person. It is about being forced to face aspects of themselves that they have long ignored. In this way, disappearing becomes a form of self-protection, a way to maintain the illusion of control over their emotions. One of the most common elements of the shadow is the fear of unworthiness. Deep down, some individuals may feel that they do not deserve love even if they are not consciously aware of this belief. This could stem from childhood experiences where affection was inconsistent, conditional, or withheld entirely. As a result, when love presents itself in adulthood, it can feel unsettling rather than comforting. The unconscious mind, conditioned to expect abandonment or disappointment, may perceive intimacy as a threat. Rather than risking potential pain, the person chooses to leave first, often without fully understanding their own motivations. Another powerful element of the shadow is the fear of losing one's identity. Love often requires a level of surrender, allowing oneself to be influenced, changed, and emotionally intertwined with another person. For individuals who strongly identify with independence, control, or emotional detachment, this can feel like a loss of self. The unconscious fear that love might consume them can drive them to retreat before they feel too deeply involved. Jungian psychology suggests that this reaction is not a sign of true independence, but rather an unresolved inner conflict, a struggle between the desire for connection and the fear of losing autonomy. Additionally, the shadow holds the fear of repeating past pain. If someone has experienced betrayal, abandonment, or deep emotional wounds in previous relationships, those experiences remain imprinted in their unconscious, even if their current relationship is healthy. The fear of history repeating itself can override rational thought, leading them to escape before they have the chance to be hurt again. The paradox is that in trying to protect themselves from pain, they often create more suffering for both themselves and their partner. Ultimately, facing the shadow is essential for anyone who wants to break free from unconscious patterns that lead to avoidance and withdrawal. Until these hidden fears are acknowledged and integrated, they will continue to influence behavior from the depths of the unconscious, keeping individuals trapped in a cycle of fear and isolation. Carl Jung's theory of archetypes provides a powerful lens through which we can understand the behavior of those who disappear from relationships due to fear of love. Archetypes are universal psychological patterns that influence human thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. One of the most relevant archetypes in the context of love and intimacy is the wounded lover, an individual whose past emotional pain shapes their present relationships, often leading them to sabotage deep connections. The wounded lover archetype is born from unresolved heartbreak, childhood wounds, or traumatic experiences that left a lasting imprint on the unconscious mind. Someone embodying this archetype may deeply crave love, but simultaneously fear it, as past experiences have conditioned them to associate intimacy with pain. As a result, they unconsciously create distance when a relationship becomes too emotionally intense, repeating a cycle of avoidance and abandonment. This explains why some people abruptly disappear when emotions grow strong. They are not rejecting their partner, but rather reacting to an old wound that has been triggered. A key element of this pattern is projection. In Jungian psychology, projection occurs when an individual attributes their own unconscious fears, insecurities, or past experiences onto their partner. For example, if someone was once betrayed in love, they may unconsciously expect betrayal in every new relationship, even if no evidence suggests it will happen. This fear-based perception can lead them to act preemptively, withdrawing from the relationship before they have a chance to be hurt. Ironically, by avoiding potential heartbreak, they create the very loneliness and disconnection they fear. Another reason why the wounded lover archetype leads to repeated patterns is the unconscious repetition compulsion, the tendency to recreate past emotional wounds in an attempt to resolve them. If someone experienced abandonment as a child or in a significant past relationship, they might unconsciously gravitate toward situations where abandonment seems inevitable. This is not a conscious choice, but rather an unconscious attempt to gain control over the past by reenacting it. Unfortunately, this rarely leads to healing. Instead, it deepens the emotional scars and reinforces the fear of love. Moreover, many individuals who struggle with the wounded lover archetype develop a false self as a coping mechanism. This false self presents an image of strength, independence, and emotional detachment, masking the deep-seated fears and vulnerabilities underneath. The more they identify with this false self, the harder it becomes for them to accept genuine intimacy. Love, which requires authenticity and emotional openness, threatens this carefully constructed persona, leading them to withdraw rather than risk exposing their true selves. Breaking free from this cycle requires self-awareness and integration. The first step is recognizing the unconscious patterns that drive the fear of love and the impulse to flee. Healing the wounded lover archetype involves facing the past wounds that shaped these behaviors, rather than allowing them to dictate the future. Until these wounds are consciously acknowledged and processed, they will continue to manifest in every relationship, ensuring that the fear of love remains an inescapable force. Healing the fear of love is not about forcing oneself into relationships or suppressing the instinct to withdraw. Instead, it requires a journey of self-awareness, inner integration, and emotional transformation. According to Carl Jung, true healing occurs when we bring the unconscious into consciousness, when we face our fears, acknowledge our wounds, and integrate the rejected parts of ourselves. For those who disappear from relationships due to deep-seated fears, this means confronting the internal barriers that prevent them from fully embracing love. The first step in this process is recognizing unconscious patterns. Many people who struggle with intimacy are unaware of the deeper forces driving their behavior. They may believe they are simply not ready for love, or that they haven't met the right person, without realizing that their own fears and unresolved wounds are shaping their relational choices. By reflecting on past experiences, especially moments where they withdrew, sabotaged a relationship, or felt overwhelmed by intimacy, they can begin to identify recurring patterns. These patterns often stem from childhood experiences, past heartbreaks, or inherited psychological structures that shape their worldview. Another crucial step is shadow work, the process of acknowledging and integrating the parts of the self that have been repressed or denied. If a person has spent years avoiding emotional vulnerability, they must ask themselves, what am I truly afraid of? Is it rejection, dependence, the loss of independence? By bringing these fears into conscious awareness, they reduce their power. Jung believed that what remains in the unconscious continues to control us. But once we make it conscious, we gain the ability to work through it. One powerful way to facilitate this healing is through self-reflection and inner dialogue. Jung encouraged engaging with the unconscious through techniques like journaling, active imagination, and dream analysis. Writing about one's fears of intimacy, revisiting past moments of emotional withdrawal, and exploring the emotions tied to love and commitment can help uncover hidden wounds. Dreams in particular often reveal unconscious fears and unresolved conflicts. Paying attention to recurring themes in dreams, such as being chased, abandoned, or trapped, can provide insight into the deeper anxieties at play. Beyond self-exploration, therapeutic work can be a transformative tool in breaking free from the fear of love. Jungian therapy, as well as other depth-oriented approaches, helps individuals explore the root causes of their avoidance patterns. Therapy offers a safe space to confront painful memories, understand relational dynamics, and develop healthier ways of connecting with others. For those who struggle with deep-seated wounds, having a guide through this process can make a profound difference. Finally, the ultimate goal of healing is learning to embrace love with courage and authenticity. Love requires vulnerability, but vulnerability is not weakness. It is a sign of strength. Those who have feared love must practice allowing themselves to be seen, to express emotions without fear of judgment, and to trust that love does not have to lead to pain. By integrating their fears, understanding their patterns, and choosing to remain open rather than withdrawing, they can break the cycle of avoidance and experience love in its fullest form.